Hey there. So, some people in politics have been saying that your rights come from God. And it's the conservative right, the religious right. Well, basically Trump. I've heard Trump say it. And then I've heard Mark Rubio say it. And then I heard Paul Ryan say it, even, that your rights come from God. Now, the question is, do they really? Well, no, they don't, ultimately. You got to really understand the idea of a right. And that is that it is proper to define rights, actually. You know, like certain ones can be inalienable. But in the end, the concept and idea of a right is because of a state of governance. That's what brings out this concept of a right. It's because governance always violates a right. I mean, take for example the inalienable ones. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the so-called, what they call inalienable ones. Perhaps. I think I've heard them being referred to that before. But in that, our government violates those all the time. I mean, the death penalty. There's a violation of right. But I know I can just hear the political voices try to push it into the abortion world and say that the inalienable right not only applies to those living, you know, as if they ever would agree to that, but also those unborn, you know, the fetus, basically. They're trying to give constitutional rights to the fetus. So, the truth of that, though, really is that, I didn't mean to go down this tangent, but the truth of that really is that before it takes the first breath, it is nothing more than the biomass of evolution. It only achieves personhood at the first breath in a state of consciousness. I mean, ultimately, that is the real truth of it. In order to be guaranteed civil rights, you got to be conscious. And that's our reality. And our government violates that all the time with the death penalty, and the church is in full support of that. So, they're also, now when they say your rights come from God, they don't. Because God does not exist in a state of governance over humankind. Because that is not our relationship to Him. The truth of our relationship to God is that it is a process of creation, of unique individuality. That is our relationship to Him, as the God of us all, with His will over ours, is so that we are created individually unique by an experience and compartmentalized consciousness in the third dimensional plane. That is the true relationship between us and Him at present time. And it is not a state of governance. And so therefore, your rights do not come from God, because God does not sit in a state of governance over humankind. Okay? And that isn't the objective. I mean, that's such a, kind of like when you're, you know, stuck in the mind of an early hominid, trying to comprehend the universe, and and governance itself, the idea of governance, is because of that state of consciousness. See, religion at this time has brought forth what is a belief in evil. And because of that, now you're all afraid, and consequently now you're going to you're going to believe that governance is somehow a correct thing. Somehow it's a divine thing. I've even seen that as justification for law, is that, an imperial state or a feudalist society would try to suggest that the laws come from the divine being, which is the king or whatever. And that's just not the case. God does not sit in a state of governance over humankind. Otherwise, we would know He was here. We would know about it for sure, and there would be no doubt. But as this is a process, you must perceive there to be a separation between you and Him. And in effect, never really know for sure if there is a God. Because if you were to know, and you were to encounter the real divine being that is God, ultimately you would lose your sense of unique individuality, and it would drive you insane. That is what happened to Moses, and that is the true deal here. So when people say that your rights come from God, they don't, ultimately. Why do they say that, though? They say it because they want the right to hate. That's what it comes down to. This all seemed to be here recently with the LGBT issue. And in that, the conservative right pushes for the idea that they are right in their hateful intolerance, and to try to say that it comes from God. So that way they can still think that they're sin-free and act as they will and be as unjust as they are and believe that they're correct in it, when in the end they are as wrong can be. If you're going to think this from that, they're on the side that is antithetical to the will of God here in this place. Because what they drive for is the idea of governance. What God wants is the idea of unique individuality. And what is governance? It is when you get down to the LGBT issue, I mean, as far as like what really drove that, it was the LGBT issue. Basically, they're saying that they have the right to hate, and I have to tell you a truth here. I am a member of the LGBT community, and in that, God has validated my identity as all part of that. The true being that I am, my sexuality is inherent to that experience of my state of consciousness. And that is the question I asked of myself in a true moment of absolute sincerity, if or not God really did hate me for the being that I was, for the person that I was. And he gave me this answer that is a redefinition of the relationship between him and us, and also a truth of who Christ really was, God on earth. So you see, as they have that wrong, the Christians, they also have wrong their stance on the LGBT issue, because God does not hate us. Quite the opposite. He has validated me for that, for that as part of what is my true identity. I'm not going to say that that is all of me. No, of course not. That is just a component of what it is that I am. As it is for everyone who is connected to their true self. Human sexuality is part of that expression of unique individuality. And therefore, that's why tolerance is the appropriate, not conformity under governance to the one life lived in one way only, because you're afraid, because the church has lied to you about the existence of evil, because they mistakenly preach an inaccuracy as to what the relationship between us and God is. It's not a struggle between the forces of good and evil. It's a process of creation of unique individuality. And until they get it right, may all that they judge be then in judgment upon them. So with that, excuse me, I'll see you next time.